Hi guys, I'm Natasha and welcome back to another episode of The Usual Place. Now, the war in Iran is in its 13th day, and here in Singapore, we are feeling the effects. Petrol prices are up, energy markets are volatile, and a global recession could even be on the cards. But there is an impact that's harder to put a number on. So, when the US and Israel launched the first attacks on February 28, they didn't just start a war. They reinforced the growing feeling that the rules-based international order that Singapore stands by and bases its foreign policy on is as good as over. So what happens now? Now, at home, will this new conflict accentuate ideological and religious divisions and test social cohesion? Now, today I'm dissecting those questions with my two guests. I have Mohamed Imran Mohamed Taib, who is the founding director of Dialogue Centre, which is a non-profit consultancy focused on cultural and racial diversity and inclusion. And I also have Straits Times Deputy Opinion Editor Bhavan Jaipragas. So thank you both for being here. Difficult conversation we're going to have. Maybe I can start with the foreign policy bit. And so, Bhavan, Singapore's always championed, as I said, rules-based international order. So this upholds the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence. And Trump completely obliterated it with Iran, and earlier in January. What does this mean for us now?
I think it's, every morning you wake up, it's like tempting to slip into despair. You look at the stock market or oil prices. You look at your push notifications. It's something that Trump has said that's upended. Just geopolitics in general, the markets. It is very tempting to be morose. But from our perspective, I'm glad that from the establishment, there's this kind of stout-hearted still defense of multilateral way of doing things, the rules-based order, even though we accept that some of it is in its deathbed. We continue to be very supportive of various initiatives. So we look at, for example, Minister Vivian's speech in the Committee of Supply, talking still about the various things we do, whether it's in trade or in maritime and in climate change. We still are very supportive of the initiatives that are still being upheld, right? On the two wars that have been ignited, our position have also been quite clear. We have said that we are against it, and the position is quite nuanced. Yeah.
But what protects us now? Because it's not like how we knew it before Trump. And so where does that leave Singapore in terms of like foreign policy? We keep holding on to something that's not really there anymore.
I don't think we are holding on to it, I think we evolve. We roll with the punches. We accept reality, and we accept that there's this preeminent superpower that's acting like it is today. We also accept that our agency, we have agency, but we don't have as much agency as the major powers. But with the space that we have, I think we have been using our voice quite effectively. Also being nuanced, also thinking also about our core interests: national unity, sovereignty and integrity of the country, security, and America still is our very important arms supplier. So I think that is also an important consideration.
So Imran, I want to get your thoughts on where we're at.
Yeah, definitely it's a very volatile situation. Yeah. But I think one thing, maybe a silver lining, is that our position, the Singapore government's position has been consistent. That could be a strength also, because despite, the global conditions being uncertain and the rules-based kind of world is changing, but Singapore's consistent position can be a strength in the sense that we can be seen as a reliable partner in terms of negotiation, in terms of trying to find ways and solutions, because the Singapore government's position is also predictable. Being consistent means you're also predictable, and people are comfortable with that if they are looking for a third party. And we can leverage on that. Of course, I think the government has expressed its regrets over the fact that people are not negotiating. And also, I think calling for people to come back to the table to negotiate and to de-escalate has been our consistent call. But more importantly also, I think the Singapore government has assured the public also that the Singaporeans' interests are at their heart. And recently we've seen how they have treated Singaporeans abroad and brought them back.
Yes, yeah.
So I think that gives a bit of assurance that despite all these things that are happening around, we can still maintain our sanity, at least here.
Yeah. Foreign policy, as it has been conducted, as you say, quite uniformly. There's no ebbs and flows. The principles are the same, right? But the environment might change, but how you apply the principles has to be the same, right? And on the repatriation, that's a very big part also of foreign policy. It cannot be taken for granted that
Exactly. Yeah.
we have friends in the Middle East who quite immediately allow you to land your MRTTs in Riyadh. Just like that, it takes years and years of good diplomacy, trust building. That is, a mark of the good work we have done on foreign policy, I think.
So I want to ask you something about bigger states acting the way they do, but I want to touch on what Imran said quickly about how the statement was worded, the MFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement was worded, said it regrets the failure of negotiations, basically, that resulted in the strikes and retaliation. There are some people who want MFA because of the way the world is to have stronger language, use stronger language, or, just come down a little bit more harshly on, what's happening in the world. Do you think, for example, it didn't call the strikes illegal? I mean, do you guys think it's the right call? Will we see more stronger language in the future, you think?
I think these statements exist on a spectrum, and the foreign policy makers look at this very carefully and when they put them out. In my mind, the statement was quite adequate. It as Imran pointed out, it expressed regret that the talks broke down, and then there was this attack and a reprisal after that.
I think we can make a distinction. When it comes to the sentiments and views of the public, it's very diverse. It depends on whichever leanings you have. But what is important to note that needs to be distinguished from the government's position that has to take into a lot of other considerations. Right. So I think the public can have a spectrum of views, and they are entitled to have those views. But when it comes to the government of the day, they have all these considerations, whether it's from the economic angle, whether it's from security angle, and also in terms of long-term thinking about what's going to happen after the war. These are considerations that maybe people on the ground don't have to put into their factors that they have to analyze. So they can take a stronger position. That's all right, whichever side they are on. But when it comes to the government position, I think we can understand why governments need to make certain decisions that sometimes may or may not agree with our own personal position.
Just on the statement, right? I just want to make this point that it should not be just look at it episodic, just one statement, right? Look at the body of comments that people have made, officials have made on this type of military intervention, right? One thing that I would urge people to go and read is the transcript of Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong's comments at the Regional Outlook Forum, ISIS, in January. And he's very unequivocal on our position about unilateral military intervention. We do not support it. It is not in our interest to support unilateral military intervention without UN sanction. Right?
But speaking of intervention, I mean, currently we're seeing major powers are acting like there are no rules. There's nothing what is stopping a bigger state from doing what it wants with us? So this could be our position, but what is stopping a bigger state from...
all countries are grappling with this question, right? And who has the answers? I think the big powers have the answers. They have spent decades abusing the UN Security Council veto system that now the UN is tethering on demise, in some parts of it at least. So the small states are doing a lot, as I mentioned just now, right? We have all these small things that we are doing to keep multilateralism alive. But the major powers need to pull their weight, and we cannot just pin the blame for the breakdown of the rules-based order on just this Trump administration. In fact, even the previous American administrations have done various things to hurt the rules-based order, including the Democrats. Yeah.
So I want to turn to Singapore because these global conflicts have actually led to some tension among communities in Singapore, because as you said, different people have different views on what's happening, right? And with the war in Iran, it's sort of playing out on social media and in chat groups perhaps. I mean, Imran, could you tell us what kind of reactions you've seen so far about the war in Iran, and how does it compare to what we've seen like with the other conflict, which is Gaza? I think that's also generated a bit of chatter here.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes social media may not be a good barometer of public opinion on issues, right? I mean, you see all kinds of views on social media, and sometimes they are quite polarizing because you have loud voices who tend to dominate the discussion and therefore give a certain perception that people are much more on this side or that side. So I think we need to take whatever that is on social media with a pinch of salt also. My sentiment, of course, we don't have any kind of surveys being done. But my sentiment, anecdotally at least, I think people are just going on with their lives, not thinking too much about this issue. But that might change pretty soon, because once petrol prices have gone up. It's going to affect basic commodities, and basically people are going to suffer rising costs and all that. Then they will start thinking about this issue a bit more. But at this stage, I think it's too early also. But there has already been concerns and anxieties being expressed about why this war has to start. So that is generally the sentiment. I would say that most people that I've encountered have no appetite for the war. I think this is quite consistent with some of the surveys that are being done. Even Americans themselves, a majority of them don't actually want this war to be started, right? So that's generally the sentiments. But of course, online you see different kind of opinions being played out. Yeah. So you see a much more hardened position. One is for the war because they felt that Iran is a threat, is evil regime, etc. But on the other side, also people think that America and Israel are the real problems. So you have these two kind of polarizing positions. But most people, I think, they are much more concerned about rising costs, and also maybe those who have family members in the Middle East, they are concerned about that. Yeah. And people with business interests also are concerned, especially those businesses that are in the GCC. So I think people come with different concerns, and we should not just see things in a very polarizing manner.
I think I'm curious to figure out what compels us to comment on a conflict or have very strong views on a conflict. Because in the Middle East, I mean, we're quite far away from it, except when we get hit by petrol prices and stuff. But why do you think, we are compelled to take sides in when we see something like this happening?
Yeah, I think generally there's an overarching moral concerns also. Right. I mean, as human beings, when we see destructions and deaths, especially, and this happened very early on the first day when you saw the school being bombed, and the young girls, hundreds were dead. I think that somehow evoked sentiments in us. I mean, if we are really human, we will feel something for it, right? So I think generally the moral concerns is what drives people. But again, when you talk about morality also, there are different considerations. Some people see the immorality of a regime that has been oppressive and been killing protesters and all that. But some pay attention more to the bombings that are affecting the civilians. So there is a kind of selection process. Now, what we need to understand is where those selection processes are coming from. Some people are selecting based on the ideological stance. They already have a position, they already have a perception about Iran or about Israel or about the US, and then they will tend to select the deeds of one or the other in order to emphasize where their moral concerns should be focusing on. Even though both have moral concerns, but their attention and focus are different. Some are also driven by maybe some theological views that we are seeing also. I mean, it was clear that some of the American elites are swayed by the religious argument of why they need to go into the war because of some eschatological or end times kind of thinking, which also exists amongst the Muslims also, seeing this as part of the end times process that is panning out, and that drives their way of trying to make sense of the situation. So they will comment based on some of this ideological position, religious position. And I've also mentioned that maybe it's their loved ones. I mean, for the Shia community, for example, they feel strongly about the clerics that are in Iran. And that's where they derive their religious legitimacy, religious opinions, and their attachment. So naturally, they'll feel affected and they will voice out, right? There are those who are much more attuned to a kind of theological stance about Israel, about the second coming of Christ. So different people might have different opinions that drive them to say something.
Bhavan, agree? Or
Yes, I also think that kind of how people divide themselves into so-called tribes, whether in commenting or and what they say to others on these topics, right? Increasingly, in a place like Singapore, one of the most literate places in the world, highly educated, people travel a lot, they're exposed to a lot of ideas. So there's a lot of intersectionality in like how they group themselves. So it's not traditional. So it is quite stereotypical to say, oh, only the Malays, only the Muslims are concerned about these issues. Others are concerned about that issue. It is quite apparent that that is not the case, right? In my mind, people being interested in issues and commenting, taking an interest in world affairs as a citizen of a city-state, an open city-state that depends on the world for livelihood is a good thing. But how we do it is also very important. For me, it's very important that if you have a view, even if it's a view that you hold very dearly, one should not then view the other person who does not have your view as a villain, vilifying the other person, calling them names, even to the extent of seeing them as subhuman, or those things that are at the root of some of the worst conflicts in human history, right? I mean, I'm not being hyperbolic. That is how things happen, right? It starts from speech, it starts from how people think, and then it turns into war, right? So I think we should be considered in how we express ourselves and behave in the public sphere.
I fully agree. I think the greater danger is when we have a binary thinking on issues.
Right.
So it's as though like one side is all evil and the other side is all good. I think when it comes to geopolitical conflicts like this, we have to be much more nuanced and see the complexity of the conflicts. I mean, this conflict is not something that happened overnight, right? This is something I think we need to educate the public also about. Maybe political literacy or geopolitical literacy needs to be ramped up, so people understand that the rivalry between Iran and the Gulf states with Israel, and also it stretches back to history also. I mean, when Mossadegh was removed from power in the 1940s, and then the Shah was reinstalled as a monarchy, and then how the Shah regime itself was repressive, and that gave rise to protests, and that's how Khomeini got into power, and the Islamic Republic of Iran came into power, which also adopted the same repressive measures. So it's not as though like one side is totally evil and the other side is good. I think both sides have problems. I mean, America, for example, have supported a lot of corrupt and authoritarian regimes. But why choose one and not the other to highlight and to attack, right? So all these nuances needs to be understood. So as people who are just observing this conflict, we should not fall into this binary thinking and be dragged into this argument, either you're with us or against us. I think that is the problem, because when we translate back to conversations on the ground, this is where I agree with Bhavan, that people may have different opinions, but I don't see the other person as the enemy. It might be just ideological opponent, but we can talk about it, we can converse, we can learn from each other through our conversations. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about people who are involved and want to know more about the conflict and, well, in some sense, take a side. But there are also people who don't really, I guess, care about this issue. I mean, you have someone like Novita Lam, who's an influencer, who recently got a bit of backlash because of what she made what she thought was an innocent joke, and then everyone came for her and she was like said she was minimizing the geopolitical situation. What did you both think about how people reacted? Was it fair? Because people just sometimes you're just not interested, or you're just apathetic, and it happens. So yes,
do
you find it funny and witty?
No, but I think social media is a very ruthless place where I feel quite sympathetic towards Novita Lam, because she, it's like the reaction was swift and ruthless. right? And then she had what I observed like a 1 week timeout. And I think in 1 month, recently she just posted that I'm back and so on. Yeah, I think she didn't read the room about sentiment. Generally, a war has been started. Head of a country has been killed. This is a very not a good thing. I mean, people's lives are being lost. There's 175 girls killed in that Tomahawk strike, American Tomahawk strike. So in these situations, I think it pays to be a bit cautious in how whether you're making jokes or being trivial about what's gone on. There will come a time when people make jokes. I saw, there are some memes going on. For example, when the war happened of Kim Jong-un and his daughter, and he's saying,
why
look,
he's left out?
No, not why he's left out. This is why I built nuclear bombs, right? So that did not get much flack. So I think it's about reading the room, having that sense of what will offend people.
Imran, you agree?
Yeah. I mean, the influencer world has a logic of its own, and I mean, to be fair to her, also she's riding on some kind of trend. I mean, she's not the only one who used that.
Correct. Yeah.
So there are others who are posted and used that same phrase.
Yes.
So maybe she just ride on it, or I'm not sure, but. I think we need to understand, reading the room is one, but we also need to understand sometimes jokes are a way of trying to cope with anxieties also.
Exactly.
But what matters is what's the context of that joke being told. I mean, if you are in a room with friends, trusted friends, sometimes, all this depressing news, you really need to just loosen up a bit in order to, outlay your anxieties and your fears. People make jokes. But the context makes it innocent in that sense. It does, but I mean, for her, because she's an influencer and she put it public, so then that invites reactions. But people do make mistakes. We learn from it, and I think she should not be cancelled. And she has apologized, and we will see. Time and time again, people make mistakes. Sometimes we may make mistakes and say the wrong things also, or being misunderstood of the context of what we are trying to say. I think there needs to be a lot more compassion in terms of how we respond to mistakes that people genuinely made and have realized that maybe that's not the appropriate thing at this stage.
So this won't be the last time that Singapore faces this kind of like internal tension over different conflicts. We have different groups of people, right, as we've talked about. And we've seen it with Gaza, actually. It's a little bit more intense with that conversation. And Singapore prides itself on being a society that can hold different views without fracturing, or at least I used to think that. What's different about these recent conflicts that kind of like stress test our cohesion, our sense of cohesion?
I think the stress is also about what will be the impact on Singapore from the security angle also. I think we cannot run away from the fact that we are also in a region that can actually cause security concerns also. And Singapore has always been mentioned as, a very close ally of the US, and even people have used terms like is the Israel of Southeast Asia, right? So
we are a strategic partner. We don't have a formal
exactly.
alliance.
That's the perception, right?
Correct,
so, I mean, we are friends to all.
Yes.
But the perception is there, and that also creates some kind of security concerns. Yes. Singapore being a soft target. And also we have seen in recent reports, there has been a rise in self-radicalization, whether in Indonesia, even in Singapore, there are a couple of people that has been detained. And that kind of anxiety may bring out some of our more prejudicial views. So it could be Islamophobia, it could be anti-Semitism, or it could be just kind of a salad bowl of extremism of some of the playbook of the far right that people are just adopting to see what they can do and make themselves counted in this kind of conflicts that are happening. So I think we need to channel some of those energies. People are concerned, but what can they do? And they feel that they want to do something and they cannot feel helpless. When you feel helpless, that's very dangerous. You might lose your ground and you might turn into something that is negative. So Singapore, so it's about having more spaces for dialogues, for people to make sense, process these kind of issues, especially for the younger generation. There's a lot of things that are going on in the social media, a lot of views and all that, and sometimes people get confused and they retreat and they keep quiet, and that's very volatile. So need more spaces to discuss these kind of issues. We should talk about it actually. Yeah.
Well, just one thing I'm very concerned about, and something that I write about, is that there are these fault lines. Obviously, because there are these divisive issues happening around the world, people take sides. But the concern is those fault lines, including our old fault lines of race and so on, and these new ideological fault lines are then capitalized by foreign actors who then egg on the divisions, because some of them have incentive to divide Singapore, right? Whether for future contingency or because they can, right? I hope Singaporeans are aware that these things are quite normal in this day and age, right? Foreign interference, even on social media, you see some kind of conversations being egged on by anonymous accounts.
Yeah.
So I think people should take cognizance that there is this trend, and just be literate on what you're talking about. I mean, you don't have to read the Straits Times, you don't have to watch The Usual Place, but please use credible media sources. Hopefully it's the Straits Times, hopefully it's The Usual Place, but as you educate yourself, please do it in a prudent way. Don't rely on AI videos and just on TikTok, people just spilling.
And don't be in your own echo chamber.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
I mean, like, for example, I read news coming out from Al Jazeera.
Yes.
As much as I also try, even though I'm not a fan of Fox News.
Yes.
I think it's important to be exposed to a variety of sources, and that's where you are able to make sense better.
Yes.
I think the problem is people tend to just gravitate towards one because it confirms their pre-existing views. Now that's dangerous because they are not exposed to counter arguments or counter perspectives.
Exactly.
And they can't learn from those counter perspectives. So we need to train people to watch Straits Times and also watch other news sources and make their own minds.
So I hear what both of you are saying, and that we shouldn't shut ourselves out from what's happening around the world. But when we engage in conversations with other people, I think some people worry, as what you said, some people do shut down, they just don't want to talk about it. But I think maybe they probably might be scared of disagreement. Like, how do you deal with that? Because some of the comments are quite polarizing. It's like, my position is right, I believe this is true, I don't really want to hear from you. And it gets heated, and I've seen this on social media, as you have, and both of you have. So how do you deal with that so that we have constructive conversation that leads to something?
Yeah, social media may not be the best platform. I still believe in in-person kind of dialogues.
I think you're like the third person to say this on the usual place, so we should take it.
But we should still monitor social media, and we should actually draw out those interlocutors on social media. If they have very strong views and we notice that there is a certain pattern to their views, I think we should bring them into conversations in person, and you see how people actually behave differently when they are talking face-to-face compared to on social media.
Yes.
And I think that face-to-face conversation can also help to moderate their stance and also reshape some of their perspectives. If you just leave it to social media, people just want to be a hero and say whatever they want, but they are not learning from the process. Yeah.
So how can the government actually manage ground sentiment and convince the public that Singapore's position is for the good of everyone?
I think they have been doing a good job, in my view. For example, the point that the foreign minister constantly makes is that the government accepts that there's a multitude of views on foreign policy. None of these views are suppressed. People can have these views, but please, as the government says, listen to what we say on how we come to decisions. There are certain principles. These principles are consistent, and understand that foreign policy has to be made not on the basis of the narrow interests of any certain group, but broad national interests, national unity, integrity of the country, the security of the country, right? If we can keep that in our mind, I think that helps in how we think about Singapore foreign policy. I mean, so we may have a quite divergent view from the establishment position, but one hopes that people can also empathize or understand why the state has to take this stance.
I think it's got to do with trust of institutions also.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we may sometimes disagree with the official position that is taken by the government. I think that's all right. But we should have this opinion that what the government was trying to do is actually to the best interest of Singapore. And they have their own considerations, even if we may have slightly different views or even disagreement with that. I think that's all right. But not to undermine the institutions itself and to create distrust. I think that's where in the long term it might be even much more dangerous. And of course, we have a democratic process, and parties can come up with their own position, and at the end of the day, we go with the government of the day that has been legitimately elected.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that needs to be understood. And now, when it comes to people having different views, sometimes too much curated kind of conversations may not be good also, because people feel there is no authenticity there. They cannot be honest with their conversations because they know that some officials or governments is watching and all that. I think there should be a lot more room for a kind of public discussions that are less curated, but the government plays an important role in terms of guarding the markers that you cannot cross. When it comes to hate speech, violence, all this, then the government has to come in. Yeah. But other than that, it doesn't have to be all the time closed door, curated. I think people should be free to discuss these issues.
How do you see that playing out in a day-to-day setting?
I mean, it's already happening online. It's just
if we take
in
it
person.
offline, so are you saying that we need to go offline and meet more people who are diverse from us, who have different opinions?
Yep. I think when you go to the coffee shop and you sit down, don't always sit down with people who agree with you. You can have better conversations when you try to understand and listen to those who have different opinions. But I think it also has got to do with our own skills of trying to manage our own emotions when we hear something that we deeply disagree with. Now, that kind of muscle needs to be developed over some time. The problem is we have not been doing this over the decades. So now this is coming, and we are just trying to grapple with this. But I'm quite confident that over time, people know how to manage their disagreements publicly without descending into polarization or conflict.
Yeah, I guess just quickly, one hopes that people don't engage in conversation based on false premise. So come back to that. There are certain facts about how we do things, why we do things, and foreign policy debates, the one that should be, scrutinized or looked at is what happens in Parliament, right? So regularly MPs ask oral questions on foreign policy. The minister has to answer. Sometimes there's a ministerial statement, the minister has to answer. And those debates are worth watching. They are not just for elite consumption, right? People should, hopefully, some of it is being processed by the media in bite-sized, segments. Hopefully people consume them and then have these discussions based on those conversations as a baseline.
This is where I feel media also can play its part. I think we can have a lot more debates happening on media also, where you invite people with different opinions to actually respond and write their opinion pieces that based on different positions. Readers actually will be much more enlightened, and they will understand that there are all these multiple opinions, and they make their own opinions after reading all these various sides. So people who are not into dialogues and discussions, at least when they read, they are being offered different opinions, and media can play that role actually.
And that's why we should watch The Usual Place. On that note, thank you both for sharing your thoughts, and thank you. I think our viewers will get something out of it today. And that's it from The Usual Place. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. And if you have thoughts on what we just discussed today, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I will see you next Thursday at noon.